I don't know why.
I've got to get the outtakes on it because they're the best bits.
Well, I can't even find. Oh, I know where it is. Hang on.
What is that, DJ?
That. Is it that? There it is. Am I still there?
Yeah, you're still here, yeah.
It was the Talk Radio YouTube feed.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, you can tell you've been in it a long time. You got your branding in there straight away before we
start. I know,
straight
away. And now I can't see you or anything. So allow this page to look. I saw, there you go. That's it. There you are.
Can you see me now?
It's just gone again. Let's just try and open that up. Brilliant. Hey! How's that, Darren? Is that all right?
That's absolutely. You can see me now, can you?
They've got a fake microphone here. This isn't actually plugged into anything. Whenever I do anything like this, I always think it probably looks better to have that there.
Yeah, well, you look the part now, though, don't you?
That's good. That's good to hear.
And I got my zesty, unhealthy drink after my race to the ice cream van.
Well, I was going to. There was a choice of a Cobra beer in the fridge or a cup of coffee.
I'm sure Ofcom there's a rule you can't do that even if you're not on air, is there?
I know. I think that's right. You're never allowed to drink, actually.
When you're near a microphone.
Of life. That's right. Exactly.
Ian Collins, it's a pleasure to have you with me today on this episode of the interviews. Been a fan of yours for a long time, actually.
That's good to hear. Yeah, you mentioned that on the email. I thought it was just a wicked lie you were saying. And I thought, I'm going to get onto this podcast and it's going to be some kind of...
Basically, I copy and paste it everywhere.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Big copy and paste thing. And then this is going to be some kind of Dom Jolly thing, where suddenly you reveal something horrendous.
So basically, I just wanted to know stuff about my broadcasting hero, to be honest. And the first thing I want to ask you is, because you're a talk radio guy, you're a very well-informed media person, you do a lot of stuff you do goes over my head, right? Because I am a proper anorak. So I love your name your best biscuits. And when you take the mickey out of stuff that that people like me are listening to, yeah?
Yeah.
So... have you ever been a
jock?
Can
I just say, I haven't done a name your best biscuit phone in for about 17 years.
But you've hinted to it not long ago, didn't you?
Yeah, I hinted about not doing it.
So have you...
future bosses are listening to this thinking, just the guy that does biscuit phones.
So have you ever been a jock? You ever been a jock? Like a DJ? Is that the way it started for you?
It's kind of funny because you've hit on something there that it kind of was, but only because I worked in local radio, wanted to do kind of phone-in stuff. And it was a bit of a mixture of the two. So you had to kind of play music, which doesn't really make you a music DJ. It just makes you a presenter who plays music, I suppose. So I've never DJ'd in that respect. I'm full of admiration for people who can do that. I think that's a whole separate skill set without sounding horrendous, because you can get that so badly wrong. You often hear a music station and somebody will say, well, he's only spoken 3 times an hour. And actually, you get these really beautifully crafted links that sound great. And the skill in just doing a short link should never be underrated. The reason people don't notice it, if you listen to a Smooth or a Magic or one of those, is because, it's seamless, and the person doing the link has made it like that. So I've never really done that, but I am still to this day royally confused and annoyed in equal measure as to why somebody who talks on the radio would be called a DJ. And people still say to me, "Oh, you're the DJ." And I just think that's such a weird, it's like calling a plumber an electrician, but one isn't better than the other. I just don't understand why everybody else doesn't. Am I expecting too much, Darren, from people?
Well, basically, I take great pride in myself because I went to, are we allowed to name drop on this? I don't know what the rules are.
Yeah, let's do it.
Right?
Yeah.
I went to the Bruno Brooks Media School, right?
Oh, I remember that. Was that in like Newbury or something?
Yes, it was. And a guy called Neil James used to be on Radio 1 years ago.
Yeah.
He was my tutor lecturer.
Yeah.
And he told us all, I was about 19 at the time, and he said, "You are not DJs, you are presenters."
Right.
And I'm like, All right. Okay. Fair enough. So do you ever correct? Did you get a little bit uppity sometimes where they go,
Yeah,
no, you're not.
sometimes.
I'm not a DJ.
Yeah, so I have actually done this. It's not very good when someone's gone, "Oh, you're the DJ, aren't you?" And I've gone, "No." Oh, and they say, "Oh, somebody told me you work on the radio." Oh, yeah, sorry, I do that. Yeah, but I'm not a DJ, which is being a bit pedantic. I'm never pedantic, but it just, I find it odd that anybody still uses the word DJ anyway. I mean, I don't know, do you describe Zoe Ball as a DJ or a presenter? I think she's probably first and foremost a presenter. But then what constitutes a DJ? Is it just playing music, or is it playing music in a certain way?
You've got to have a voice to be a DJ. You've got to have a good
Yeah.
afternoon. It's just gone 2:00 and you've got to hit the lyrics on the dot.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
There's all of that. But
Sorry,
then there's
Neil Fox.
then there's but then there's DJs, aren't there? There's the people that charge 30 grand to do your New Year's Eve. Those kind
What
of
universe
things.
are you in?
Yeah, well, I wish I was in Pete Tong's universe, but those kind of the club DJs, obviously, and then there's radio DJs, and I don't know whether a radio DJ is just somebody who plays music, or whether somebody who plays music in a in an engaging music-based fashion.
Well, I have done the clubs.
Yep.
I've done clubs in only just because in commercial, you work in commercial radio, I get that, but in the music commercial radio industry, you've only got to make a T the wrong way, and then they have you in the office for the chat.
Yeah.
And then they show you the door. So I tend to I do weddings and all that kind of stuff as a backup plan. Yeah. So just in case something goes wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I'm a DJ. But
that makes sense, because you play music and you know how to play music, and you know how to time it, and you know what goes with what, and that's the point.
If we're going to go all Anaraki and talk about back timing, I just look for 2.5-minute songs to go to the news. Yeah. I'm not special.
Did you, when I first worked in radio, I used to the challenge to talk up to the lyric was immense, and I used to pride myself in being quite good at it. And I think and actually the truth was nearly everybody was good at that bit, because it's just in you to know. You must have had this, Darren, even if you've not heard the track before, you just know when the lyric's coming in.
Yeah.
So just instinctively get it. And then I realized there was more kudos in not talking up to the lyric, because everybody else talked right up to the first word of the song. And I kind of stopped doing it. So I went about 5 seconds before. And I was quite proud of that. It meant absolutely bugger all, but I was proud of it.
No, you should be proud, because people like me that have been on it as long as me can actually talk up and leave enough space to play a dry sweeper that then goes to the lyrics. Now that's a skill.
That's always good. Yeah, that's always, you can do that. That's always good.
Yeah, but it's never got me a gig anyway. But there you go. Just an Anorak thing. Oh, I've done that. All right, that sounds right. So let's talk about your talk radio shows and all of your. I mean, first of all, your podcast. Are we allowed to talk about your podcast? Because
absolutely.
You kind of do a bit and then you disappear. Then you do a bit and you disappear. But you make jokes with. Is it Sideshow Kev, whoever he is? I don't know who he is.
Yeah.
So how does all that work? Why does it stop and start? Is it because you're just busy?
Because it's mostly down to basic laziness, to be honest. That's why it stops. And because I can't remember how many episodes we've done, but oddly we were looking back at from about 4 years ago, just the amount of downloads we had for these episodes. So it was called Ian Collins Wants a Word, for those who haven't heard it, and we got a sponsor for it as well really early on, which nobody could work that out, and it's a whole long story as to how that happened. I'd love to say it was just down to the fact that a car company thought, these guys are amazing, let's sponsor it, but there was a bit more involved in that. Anyway, so we had this sponsor. We did it every week pretty much for a good year or so, I think, and then it kind of, with just other commitments, it just petered out a little bit. Then we came back with Christmas specials, and it is just about time, because as you know, it looks like, I mean, you can just turn up and talk, and that can work some of the time. It works in the format that we're doing it now. That's perfect. But if you've got various features and you want to make it engaging and entertaining and keep up the kind of things you've been doing before, it does take a bit of work. So, an hour-long podcast might be another 2 hours to put together. So that's 3 hours of your day. And if you've got home from work at 5, half 5, as I do, you haven't always got that. It's slightly easier now, of course, because we can all sit at home and do stuff rather than, getting on a train or whatever.
On your talk radio show, are there any subjects that you are nervous about tackling? Do you look at something and go, I can't do that, that's too raw?
It's always, no, I tell you what it is. It's always, immigration is always tricky because, and I genuinely don't like talking about it because it's usually full of fairly uninformed voices. But we know this because of things like Brexit and, various other kind of areas of life that are, you should be able to talk about immigration. You should absolutely be able to talk about all those things connected to immigration. And previously, people had felt disenfranchised and missed out because they were told, if you talk about this, then you're a mad racist. And lots of people who really are not mad racists are thinking, hang on a sec, I've just got an opinion on, immigration, on social cohesion, or whatever it happened to be. But the debate sort of got closed down, and then certain high profile figures in the world of politics kind of take it over, and then it gets tarnished again with the kind of race brush. So, and something as important as immigration from all angles you should be able to talk about that. The trouble is that often people just use the wrong terminology. And I'm not talking about racial slurs. I'm just talking about, if you talk about racism in a casual way, it sounds like you don't care. So somebody rings up and they say, the trouble is when they come over here, and straight away that phrase, they come over here, will sound, and it shouldn't be like this because it's just a statement of fact, but because that's the sort of very phrase that's been picked up on as being, a bit dubious, it just means that you end up policing language in a way that you don't want to police because you want it to be a free debate, but you're also aware that, people can slide very easily into, I don't even mean lazy language, just stereotypical language. And that stereotypical language has now become sort of reasons to point the finger at people. So just the use of the pronoun they when talking about immigration somehow sounds wrong, despite the fact that it sounds uncaring, it sounds dismissive, and it might not be. It might just be somebody's way of conveying their thoughts. So my point, I think, overall is it's just a very tricky debate to have. And of course, it comes up quite a lot because of the English Channel story and everything. And it's very, very hard to ever get, to the bottom of it, or to get, it's a bit like Brexit in that respect. You go around in circles.
You see, I in music commercial radio, I fell upon my own sword I think it was, when was the Sam Smith story that he wanted to be referred to as they?
Yeah. Was that the beginning of this year or the end of last year? I can't remember.
So his new single came up on the playlist, and I thought, I'm going to be clever here, right? I'm going to say they have a fantastic voice.
Yeah.
Oh my days, I was hated.
Really?
Yeah, I was getting, because I do a family show, a weekly breakfast show. Our children listen to this, and obviously Sam Smith is a man or a boy or a male, and I'm like, he wanted to be referred to as that, so I'm saying yes, I will, if that's your choice to be referred to like that. I'm not trying to aggravate you on the school run, love. I'm sorry about
that. You see that. That's also a really tricky area at the moment when you get into kind of gender issues, and there's obviously some huge debates going on between, J.K. Rowling, for goodness sake, the author of Harry Potter, has found herself as a controversial figure in the gender debate. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, and you think, I'm pretty sure J.K. Rowling doesn't hate anybody. I'm 100% sure she doesn't hate anybody. And it might just be she's got certain views that somebody disagrees with. So you get this group of people called TERFs, trans exclusionary radical feminists or something. So certain fairly robust and forthright trans voices don't like, there's a group that they call the radical feminists. And radical feminists are saying, look, whatever goes on in this debate, women should also have, the word woman should be reserved for people who've got a woman, a backstory of being female and all that goes with that. And they want to protect that. So that group are being called bigots by another group. And J.K. Rowling finds herself in that group. And then you've got another group in the trans community who are quite radical and quite right-wing. And they don't recognize or acknowledge, or some of them don't recognize or acknowledge the gender. What's the phrase? What's the phrase? Non-gender. I'm sure you can cut a bit out, Darren.
No,
right. I can't use this phrase every single day. Somebody who essentially describes themselves as having no gender at all. They're neither male nor female.
Non-binary. No.
Non-binary. Yes. Non-binary.
Yes. Yeah.
So non-binary.
Music jock, and I know that.
And so, I was interviewing some sort of trans campaigners recently, and they're saying this non-binary thing is nonsense. It's ridiculous, which would be the Sam Smith. And I'm thinking, hang on a second. So you've just kind of got to this place where you've suffered discrimination and you think you're now in a place that's a little bit better, but it's not perfect. And now you're saying, but there's another group over there. We don't acknowledge that group. And so this whole labyrinthine discussion about gender is just, it's an absolute minefield. It's completely bamboozling, I think, to anybody. And there's a lot of presenters, I think, leave that alone for that reason.
I should never have pampered to his whatever he wanted us to pamper to when I referred to him as them or they. But what I was trying to get at is that when I joined media and radio, it was fun, it was exciting, it was kind of cool. You were a bit like a pop star, and you remember them days, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Being in media was exciting. But now it's, if my son ever said to me, my eldest son who's 16, he wants to work in media, I would say to him, be very, very careful, because you can say one thing that you think is quite funny and it's okay because you're not offending anybody, but the world will jump on you.
Yes. And sometimes it's a perception rather than a reality. So companies react to the fallout, not the actual thing that happened. I've seen statements from people who've, lost their jobs, and companies have said, we completely acknowledge that, our employee did nothing wrong. And, however, we now think there's, sufficient conversation around this. And you think this is really strange. And I see it all the time when, whether it's a comedian on social media or there was a comedian after the Euro final that, said a bunch of terrible things on social media. And I thought, why did he write that? Because he's literally just signed his own death warrant. He'll probably never work again. And it's, it's right that people are called out for saying terrible, horrendous and offensive things. I get that, although offense is, in the big debate on that. But some things are categorically wrong. We also know that. But it is strange, isn't it? That, one word, one moment of madness. And I'm not talking about somebody being a racist or a homophobe. I mean, all of that's a given. Just the wrong thing in the wrong order at the wrong time.
Yeah.
Bang, you're gone.
Yeah. And that includes making a brew in the wrong way.
Yeah, that's top of the list.
I went onto Wikipedia, Ian, and I know what you're going to say. Oh, these people who research on Wikipedia, but you get some really good, strange stories. I don't believe this for a second. Did you have a hand in your very early career up north, Sheffield, Hallam FM? Were you involved up there at some point?
No, does it say that on Wikipedia?
I read that somewhere. I don't know where I read it from. And I'm no, he's not.
It's now ringing a bell, because it's now making me think that I have read that from somewhere. I used to, because I was doing a podcast the other day and we were reminiscing about when you went around the country, and you'll remember this, and you know, if you're a bit of a radio anorak and you went from region to region and you heard the jingles on, you know, in Cambridgeshire or Red Rose in Lancashire or, you know, Hallam 210 FM, and, you know, all of these different Piccadilly, all of these different, and it was magical, wasn't it? If you love radio, that was a magical thing. How are they doing it in Cumbria? How are they doing it in Norfolk? How does it sound in Cornwall? And it was, to me, that was incredible. And as we all know now, that, you know, most of these, not all, but most of these radio companies are owned by just a couple of companies. And some have kept a certain identity and others have just, you know, gone on to be sort of Capitals or Hearts or whatever. But I just remember, whenever you say Hallam, like straight away, that's one of those trigger words for me that takes me back to,
so,
you know, that sense of when local radio was local radio.
So have you're not from Sheffield then, no?
No, I'm not. Whereabouts are you, Darren, now?
Can you tell from my accent where I'm from?
Well, you're somewhat, well, I would, see, you're going to hate this. I would have probably said Manchester.
You what?
I know, is that the end of the podcast?
Thanks very much, Ian. And
yeah, keep in touch.
Yeah. No, Stoke-on-Trent.
Oh, you Stoke-on-Trent?
You've never been to Stoke-on-Trent, have you? You're the guy. I'm sorry to say it, but you don't strike me as the sort of person I've been to the Potteries, eh?
I was the mayor of Stoke-on-Trent for 3 years. Now, I've only been to Stoke-on-Trent when stuck at a train station. And I'm trying
purely by accident.
Yeah, but there's loads of places that happens to, doesn't it? It's a bit like Stockport, just to sort of bring a bit more of a Mancunian vibe into it. Yeah, I've never been to Stockport other than on the train.
Stoke-on-Trent's great. I mean, we have things up here like oat cakes.
Yeah, I mean, they do exist elsewhere, oat cakes.
No.
I reckon if I rummaged through my cupboard, I'd find an oat cake.
What's an oat cake, Ian? Describe to me an oat cake.
I've no idea. What is it? Is it kind of one of the, is it round?
No.
And is it not?
It is round, but it's very flat and flimsy. It's savoury, not a cake.
Oh, right. A savoury oat cake.
You can roll it up and you put in, it's great when you've had a few jars the night before. You roll it up.
Roll it, what is it, a spliff or a cake?
And you put cheese in it, and you can put egg in it, and you basically can put a breakfast in it, and you roll it up.
Isn't that just an omelette?
No. No.
Omelette. I can't believe I've never had an oat cake then.
No, nor has Harry Judd from McFly that I believe this week when I did an interview with him, and he looked at me like you are, like, what are you talking about?
But it sounds like, because you know, you get like the word oat and wheat are like big words at the moment for cakes and bars. Oat bar, wheat bar, you know, oat snacks, bag of oats, bag of wheat, blah blah. So it sounds like, well, I must have had an oat cake. I must have had an oat cake, and you've just described something I've never had.
I'm gonna have to. No, I'm not gonna. I was gonna say I'm gonna have to get you to have one, but I can't even send you one down there to try or anything like that because that's just a bit weird. So I'll scrap that what I've just said. Let's move on anyway and leave food where it is, because if we talk food, we're going to get on to your favourite and my favourite item of food, which is a bucket of the Colonel's finest.
Absolutely, yes, correct.
And I'm still fighting the lockdown wait. But talking about lockdown, Talk Radio, I don't know who's in charge of Talk Radio because I work for a very small commercial broadcaster, so I don't know who's in charge of you guys down there. But what he's done with the TV aspect thing, for an anorak like me, is fantastic. It is brilliant.
It's amazing, isn't it? I was talking to, I went to the swimming pool. I went to the gym this morning where there's a pool. And this guy, it's always funny when this happens. This guy I've like talked to when I go there just to say hello. He said, okay, can I just ask you something? He said, I was just looking around my telly at the weekend and I came across this station called Talk Radio. And he said, and I put it on and there was an advert for a show. He said, and the guy really looks like you. He said, is that you on there? And what was interesting about that, I only tell you that, Darren, because I told my boss this same story today, because it was the first time somebody had specifically referenced not the visual, that happens a lot now, but the fact that it was through an app on a television. So the word television was intrinsically linked with the word radio in somebody's mind. And when I first started at Talk Radio, so Talk Radio was owned by News UK, who owned The Sun, The Times, Sunday Times, HarperCollins, Wall Street Journal, all of the above. And TalkSport, obviously, and Virgin. So we're all in the same room. There's us in the middle, there's Virgin to the left, and TalkSport to the right, on the same floor. And at some point, I think fairly early on, but somebody decided that it would be a good idea to just start filming it. I think this was before I worked there. And then they obviously thought this could be quite good. This could be our USP. This could really work for us. And then decided to, start making good the background. So it wasn't just a studio. It was purpose built, nice screens, and then more camera angles. And then fast forward to where we are today. I mean, I work in radio. I used to be able to go to work dressed like this. I now walk into work in a suit with a tie, and the first room I have to head for is the makeup department, where Marta and Magda diligently make some very ropey looking people look rather good. And now it's kind of all about that. It won't suit every radio station, but for Talk Radio, that's become absolutely huge. So it's gone from being something you could just watch on YouTube to being a dedicated app on your phone or your tablet, your smart. I feel like I'm doing a live read. So it's a bit like that. But now, because TVs are smart TVs as well, and you have apps on your television, it's also on there as well. So and I know some people kind of they scratch their head and go, no, radio should be radio, and that's the beauty of it and the magic of it, that you don't see all of that. And that will be the case and should be the case for many formats, but actually for Talk Radio, it just works and it's become a big thing. So you suddenly have, we're all in the commercial world here. Regardless of how many listeners you've got listening to you on the radio, you've got sort of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, collectively millions, who are tuning into these videos and digesting, either entire shows to watch back, listen again, or, best of interviews, that kind of thing. Because the other thing is all the guests as well are also now, they'll all come in on Zoom or they'll be in the studio. So the guests are also visual. It's a massive change. I mean, it's mind-blowing, really. But
it's not new, though, is it, Ian?
No, not entirely.
Radio, InVision Radio is not new. Think back to Pip Schofield, Broom Cupboard. That was like an InVision presenter in a little studio. I don't even remember Gary Terza that did CITV InVision in the 1980s and early 90s.
I remember CITV being InVision, yeah. But of course, James Whale, who had done radio air and became a TV show as well, was kind of predates all of that, I guess.
So there's nobody in your board meeting or whatever you do when you're all getting together and talking about it, has no one ever said, this has been done before, this is a nice throwback to what used to be done a few years back?
I think it's sufficiently different enough now in that it's, before, like Philip Schofield in the Broom Cupboard, he wasn't, I don't know whether it was a radio studio or a control room, but it wasn't real, or some of it was real actually, as I remember. So I think he did make programs.
Round and come up.
It was more about the set than anything. It was more meant to look, because I think radio studios look magical. I think these things, are still magical. Headphones are still, magical.
Yeah.
Even though now we have to wear those little kind of things that you'd expect Gary Barlow to be wearing, so that they don't see the headphones above your head. So I think they've just really, capitalized on something that they thought, will this work? It appears to have worked, and they've really run with it and thrown a lot of resources at it to make sure that it becomes their thing. So in radio terms, I think Talk Radio have kind of, probably scuppered a lot of people on that one.
What's next for Talk Radio? Can they go any further? Or have they come to a point where we've done everything we can with the basic idea of radio? There's
I mean,
nothing.
yeah, I think so. I mean, I think talk radio is very much still in the ascendancy. It's kind of still being discovered by a lot of people. When I first started in national radio, which was on the original Talk Radio, and then that became Talk Sport. And I've told this story a load of times, that I remember when Talk Radio started. So Talk Radio started in '95, but in around about '98, somebody, I can't remember who it was, producer or whoever, said, in 20 years' time, there'll be 50 of these stations in the country, national talk stations. And the reality is, in 20 years' time, there's actually less than there was in 1998, because although Talk Radio is back, there's LBC, which is now national through DAB. I mean, 5 Live to a degree, but that's sport as well as, you know, in the States, literally every state, as you know, has, 10, 15, 20 talk stations, just talk, doing news and current affairs. And in the UK, we just haven't really gone there. So I think with talk radio coming into vision as well, and talk radio is a little bit more alternative than, certainly in the BBC, in that it does explore, other narratives. It does ask some of those questions that don't get asked. Lots of, even COVID. You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to want to ask questions about, stuff that doesn't make sense. If anybody's made sense of COVID, then you're either a witch or you're kind of, somebody that knows something in the higher echelons of government the rest of us don't know. It simply doesn't make sense, but none of it makes sense. So we'll ask questions around some of those areas that don't make sense. I was reading the other day, just to dwell on that point for a second, because you do have to be careful, because the minute you question, there is a belief that if you say anything that questions the narrative, you're called a conspiracy theorist. Now, I'm the guy that attacks the conspiracy theorists, so it's very unusual if I get called a conspiracy theorist, because I'm normally taking the pee out the conspiracy theorists, and there are plenty of them who say the most extraordinary things. But there was this stat I was reading about, and we confirmed it, that a lot of people have died in the last year and a half. 135,000 people have died of or within 28 days of having a positive test, as we now know. And under 30s, the figure is 260, I think it is. So 260 people under 30 out of 130,000 have died with COVID written on their death certificate. In all probability, people with some very chronic underlying health conditions. So you could go as far as saying it's pretty unusual, almost unheard of for anybody under 30 to die with COVID in any capacity. So why would you want to vaccinate all those people, given that in any other walk of life, doctors will do everything not to give you medicine, even when you think you want it? They'll always go, no. So that's not unreasonable to ask that question. I asked a virologist that question today, and he gave me quite a good answer. It divided the room, but it's not unusual to ask that. And I think we're living in a world where not enough places ask those questions. That's not a conspiratorial question. That's a question that anyone with a brain would ask themselves. What? And fine, there's a great answer. It doesn't mean there's some shady Illuminati out there cooking up plans and trying to control the world. It's just a question, but my experience is those kind of questions aren't asked enough. And I think talk radio have been pretty good at asking those questions.
I want to go back and talk about the anorak stuff. Now, you're a talk radio host, and
yeah.
I'm not a talk radio host. So if I say something wrong, I'll probably get the sack tomorrow, right? But commercial music radio is not what it used to be. Am I right in saying that? That's about right, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't walk out of my studio and send a demo to my mate that works in another local radio station and go, "You got anything going? Yeah, come down and see us." That doesn't happen anymore, does it?
That's correct. Yeah.
So, but what I want to get at is, where do you stand, Ian Collins, on looking at all of these big groups that have bought up all these radio stations? Now, I completely get the business makes the world go round.
Yeah.
That's the world we live in. I understand that. I'm not bitter about that. But what I am a little bit bitter about being a commercial music radio presenter is that how would somebody like me move somewhere else? So my advice from you, Ian Collins,
Yeah, it's funny. I
what's my
remember,
next? I'm 40. What's my next step?
so I remember when, again, one of those conversations that I'm sure you had as well, when I first worked in local radio, as in didn't get paid, just you to turn up. I remember two things. I remember the head of music saying, we were talking about American stations that play, when that voice goes, and now another 8 in a row. And it used to seem incredible that any station could play 8 songs in a row without somebody talking. And this guy said to me, he said, I promise you, he said, there will be a time when stations in this country are playing 8 songs in a row. It will happen. And he said, and I'll also tell you, there'll be a time when, 2 or 3 companies will own all the radio stations. To go back to our previous conversation about, the beauty of all these different, even seeing the logos of all those different stations was magical. And of course, both those things turned out to be correct. And it's funny because I worked for a company, the last company I worked for, that kind of do own most of those or many of those stations. And I remember being in the staff meetings when they would say, oh, we've just acquired this group or that group, and we'll be changing the name to this, and that group will be called that. And part of me thought, wow, if I owned this station, I'd be doing just exactly that. But there was another part of me, and it was only the romantic part, that thought, that's kind of strange because it has sort of lost a localness. That said, if I was listening to you just by dint of your accent and your kind of, your knowledge of the terrain and the area.
I kind of stop you. If you mention the Beeb, by the way, my local BBC radio station, I'm going to throw my phone at the screen. Because that door has closed on me 4 or 5 times over in the last 3 years. It's opened, closed, opened, closed.
It's kind of strange because before I went to Talk Radio, I had a little moment at the Beeb at BBC Kent. So your station would be BBC
Radio Stoke.
But of course, BBC Radio Stoke. In fact, there's somebody from Radio Stoke that has, I can't remember who it is, that tweets me every now and again, or used to.
Is it a lady?
No, it's a guy. And I can't think who it is.
Oh, it might be John Akers or somebody, or...
Yeah, anyway, it's kind of strange, isn't it? Because the BBC is sort of, slightly, and they changed all the local schedules, didn't they, after, which, the schedule on BBC Stoke, timing-wise, is now the same as the one on BBC Kent. And they got rid of most of the double headers and all of that business. And now I no longer really understand the point of BBC local radio than anything. I get the, breakfast shows, do have their local content, and it's kind of as if, like, let's play loads more music, but also name check all the local places.
See,
so that makes everybody feel good, and that's it.
I need to interject here, Colin, because I've got a really good story to tell you. Right, so I've sent my BBC style demo. Right, I said this interview was going to go really Anorak styly, but obviously it has. So I've sent it to BBC Birmingham, sent it to a number of other BBC stations out of the area, and they all love it. They said, if you lived locally to here, the door would be open for you. Right? I'm like, great. But you've got a Stoke-on-Trent accent, so you need to send it to X, Y, and Z there. I do that, and they go, nothing here for you at the moment because we've got plenty of local presenters. No, they haven't. The breakfast presenter's from Southampton. The breakfast producer is from on the South Coast somewhere.
That's interesting.
The mid-morning presenter is from Birmingham. Why are they not on their own BBC station? So nobody actually on air is a Stokey.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
it's funny because you're right. BBC Essex. I think I'm right in saying that the breakfast show presenter is from Edinburgh. So, but that wouldn't. The only place that wouldn't work is that you or I could never get a job on BBC Scotland.
Yes.
in a million years.
Would you want to go to Scotland and do talk radio? No.
No, oddly, I haven't applied there for weeks. But they wouldn't. They just wouldn't put an English voice on a Scottish radio station, but they would put a Scottish voice. To make it even more mysterious, they would put an Irish voice, which isn't even the same country, on an English radio station.
Yes.
So you have Ronan Keating doing the Magic Breakfast, but that's national. But even locally. So I've never quite known how that accent thing works. That's kind of strange, isn't it?
I've just come to the fact that now I'm 40. I think I'm in my last radio gig for my career. Unfortunately, I think when my boss, who is a businessman, decides to sell out and call it a day, I think that'll be me done. I need to go and find a paper round again or something. I don't know. I'm qualified for nothing apart from talking. So
I know it's weird, isn't it? I think, BBC is, should have a place, and I just don't quite know what it is now, because as you say, music radio wise, that's kind of not really. I don't know where the next evolution is of that. I don't know if there is another evolution other than, keep playing. I mean, I'm always amazed when, because you talk to somebody who's, some friends of ours, their daughter, who's about 13 or 14. And I asked her, summer barbecue, what radio station she listened to. This is absolutely true. She didn't know what the word radio meant.
Right.
So she said, what's that? What's a radio station? I said, that plays music. She said, what, like Spotify? So, well, no, but they're stations. So I was trying to explain she had no concept of it. She doesn't listen to a radio station. And then when you look, when the listening figures come out, it says that, Capital across the UK has 66 trillion listeners. And you think, wow, so people are still listening. Heart's got, similar number. Kiss, whatever, Magic, all the usual suspects. You think, well, so there is still lots and lots of people listening to conventional radio, despite the next group, not. And it's kind of funny, isn't it? I don't know where that goes.
Well, a lot of my old radio colleagues from other stations that have lost their jobs, they've said to me, why don't you get yourself involved in a community station? I go, well, I got a problem with community stations. I live in a world where I have to pay bills.
Yes.
So maybe I can talk to our mortgage provider at home and go, I'm going to go work for free because that's the only thing I can do. So do you mind?
Yeah. True enough.
Yeah.
True enough.
Ian Collins, I know you've got to shoot anyway. So thank you so much. We can talk about this for a long, long time. And it's been a pleasure to talk to you. Just before you go, just one more last thing. Judging from me talking to you now, would I make it as a talk show or a talk radio host? Would I carry one?
You've got a fantastic voice, and you've got a good. I mean, there is something about the regional accent. I envy the regional accent because I'm now bog standard Southern accent, and I just think that's in the world we're currently in. It's funny how we all have these kind of like the sort of self-analysis of who we are.
It's the delivery that matters, doesn't it?
When I first wanted to get into radio years ago, I probably had the right voice. And now I always think, wow, if you've got a bit of an accent, I think that gives you an edge. It gives you an attitude, so I think you could be, with your accent, you could be a worse presenter than me, but sound like a better one. Because the accent can do it. I don't mean specifically me and you. I mean, generally speaking, I think an accent can buy you a lot of. There's various things. The tone of voice can buy you X amount of house points with bosses or with listeners. So tone of voice, accent can be another one. I mean, if Ant and Dec had Southern accents, they wouldn't be Ant and Dec.
No, but basically you're saying I'm crap, but I'm an interesting guy, basically.
Yeah, it's exactly that. Yeah.
Thanks a lot for that. Anyway, I'm now going to go and listen. I'm going to go listen to Tommy Boyd's old podcast.
You take the point though, that I think that, I think your accent is not only a great accent and a great voice, by the way, as well as your accent, but still widely missing in kind of talk formats. It's just not there, really. It's just simply not there.
Yeah.
You know, who's that person nationally that has that accent?
Plus, you've got to be a well-known name. You're a well-known household name. All your colleagues are well-known household names. So little Daz Antrobus from Snee Green in Stoke-on-Trent ain't gonna jar the door open. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think there's never been a time now when people don't better than now, when people just don't. You know, the idea that you've somehow got to have worked X amount of years, you've got to have been on Fleet Street for 14 years and all that. I misguidedly thought you still had to do all that stuff. And now, you know, somebody will be on air. I'll look at the schedule and somebody's on air and I'll think, hang on, how did that happen? Not necessarily on our station, you know. And you think, what do they do? They've never been on the radio in their life.
Yeah.
And they turn it on and they're actually, you think, shit, they're actually quite good as well. Just to make it even more annoying. They're actually quite good. How did this happen? So strange times.
Fantastic. Ian Collins, absolute legend. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you for talking to me. It's
a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Have a good one. Cheers, Darren.